Okay, welcome back everyone. Begin with the fourth session, which is titled What is Home? We have three people presenting in this session. Jaya, holding of motion and emotion in housing. Aishwarya will follow that with the character of a home. And Rutvik will talk of the quest for a better one, an inquiry into why a plan felt more evocative than the other. Uh, can you start presenting?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So, in the course of the studio, there were certain questions that came in my mind, like why are people not able to connect to their houses and their neighborhood as much as they can considering the housing is the most personal typology in architecture. And is it the people who are not sensitive enough, or is it the house that is not expressive or evocative enough to allow for such connections? And what are these connections? And isn't it the lack of poetics in architecture of mass housing? Hence the topic of motion and emotion in housing. Sorry. Firstly, what is poetics? How we understand poetics in literature is which is supposed to be read is as a play of words and rhythm, as expression of different sensories like smell, feel, audio that provoke certain thought beyond just the aesthetics of how it is written or how it uses the grammar. It is about the metaphoric and symbolic descriptions that enables certain thoughts in the minds of the reader. Similarly, in architecture, which is supposed to be expressed and experienced, is a play of motion and a relative motion, not all the time, but at specific moments in time, which provoke certain thought, which are not just through how space looks like, but beyond these aesthetics and certain descriptions of symbols and personification of elements in that space, seeming to explain some hidden meaning where it's not just you and the space, but the realization of the presence of other things, maybe other dimension or other form of life. And all of this is never forceful, but has an impact. In order to understand this poetics in housing, it was important to know about certain spaces which are evocative and hence people's favorite, and which ones are not. And on asking my friends and colleagues, I found out that certain spaces like the drawing room, guest room, bedroom, balcony, front yard, backyard, or gardens were considered to be evocative spaces, whereas other spaces like parking, staircase landings, front balcony, bathrooms, study rooms, common playgrounds were not considered to be evocative enough. And it was found that these people tend to spend most of their time in the spaces that they like, that is, which are evocative, and avoid spending time in the spaces which are non evocative. But interestingly, they visit both the spaces every day of their lives. And in that sense, those non evocative spaces are not unvalued or unutilized spaces, but just spaces that do not allow for certain desirable connections. Some of the observations made are all the spaces mentioned as favorites and hence evocative are those which belong to the inhabitants privately. That is, what's immediately outside the house or the housing complex, which is a shared space, doesn't seem to have those kind of connections with the inhabitants. Also, the most light spaces are the spaces that allow certain connections to nature, like the greens in the garden or veranda, or certain kind of conversations or spending time with the family in a living room or a bedroom. While the disliked spaces like bathrooms, parking spaces, or kitchens are those which have been accepted as utility spaces and never looked at beyond just functional spaces only. While recollecting and compiling of data, it was revealed that there are certain factors that are emerging as essentials for making that space evocative. For example, the presence of greens in a space, like shown in some of these photographs, and also the relationship between a window and a working desk space. And if the space allows for certain attachment and detachment both, and with the space, and also felt secured or not, and if it also feels lively and at the same time allows for privacy. Similarly, the non-evocative spaces like bathrooms, parkings, kitchens, etc., reveal that the consideration of other factors like size of the space, and if it's congested, compacted, claustrophobic, suffocating, or if it's kept clean, or is it dingy, or does it have less ventilation and is considered to be unsafe. While there were two of these spaces, the balcony and one's own bedroom, that fell under the category of both. On comparing what activities take place in the balcony, which makes that space evocative, it was found that it's the idea of leisure and nature together that does so and creates that connection. Similarly, the natural artificial smell, like that of the incense sticks, for example, and hearing and seeing nature and neighbors makes it evocative. While the same space becomes non-evocative with the fact that it is a utility area, and what you feel there is just a matter of light quality and the idea of safety. Talking about bedroom spaces, which are unlike the balcony spaces, which come under the category of the in between spaces, hold all the capability to allow for all such activities, and hear, see, and smell human and nature, and generate certain comfortable feeling amongst the people in that space, and that is how it becomes an evocative space or a light space. While the bedroom becomes a non-evocative space while sleeping, for example, and all one seems to talk about was the dogs barking outside the room or complete silence, and even the view to the neighbor's house throughout, inside out. And on comparing all the understandings of what makes that space evocative or not, it was understood that the smell, the sound, the visual, and the feel of the rain, for example, is desirable, but that of the dripping water down through the pipe is not. Similarly, noise of the birds chirping is desirable, but that of the cars and those of the neighbors around is not desirable. Hence, in order to create connections to a space, inclusion of both humans and nature is desirable to create a happy and comfortable environment, though in varying degrees of the same depending on the personal choices of the people. It is acknowledged that a happy building is a celebration of both nature and humans together. Borrowing from Walter Benjamin's book on reflections, where it is these forms of life that are the humans and the nature that are mobile and hence are considered joyful. Even Gaston Bachelor, in his book on poetics of space, and Christopher Alexander in Timeless Way of Building also mentions the certain terms such as the dramatics, the cosmic, motionless body that creates instances of that reminds one of the happiness of inhabiting a space, and the morphological characteristics of a space, the unpredictable, something without control that becomes a whole and becomes alive. And that is how motion generates emotion in a space. As an attempt to building on this knowledge further and creating an evocative poetic space, a simple act of drying clothes in a utility balcony, for example, was visualized. And so in Ahmedabad, most of the people wash clothes every day, either using a washing machine or both washing machine and a chalkedy space. It's not only in India, but other places like Singapore or China, for example, where these visuals of drying clothes are seen and experienced. I would also like to read out one part of the poem that I wrote, which was based on the same kind of a space about drying clothes that I wrote for myself. That was visualized as an expression of motion and emotion that is generated in the act of drying clothes. So here it goes. Then the last wind stroke took it away, and I was simply in the awe of it. Sunlight piercing through it, translucent on my hands, as if asking me to hold it for one last dance. And you know what? I stayed and sat underneath. I smelled the jasmine laundry bit as I could breathe in the cozy, cool space of colorful teas. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaya. Now request Aishwarya to continue.
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. I'm Aishwarya, and the topic of this discussion is the character of home. I'm sure all of us have come across. I'm sure all of us have come across profiles on dating websites. It usually has a profile picture that tends to display just you or a part of your life that is super prominent. Then you of course have a name and age and location. But what really fascinates me is the bio of this profile. It's interesting that a person has to choose 5 to 10 lines to describe themselves and, more importantly, express their individual idiosyncrasies. While some try to be secretive, some really try to put themselves out there. I think the bio largely tries to give a peep into the personality of a person, describes things that are unique to them, that are personal and specific to them, and talks about prominent likes and dislikes, strengths and weaknesses, interests and disinterests. What if we were to look at a home in a similar way? Try to make a profile of a home which displays its character. I think it would be interesting to see what is portrayed as its personality and what becomes its quirks. If I were to look at equivalence to the given aspects, I'd say character tags against a peep into the personality, which I will be shortly talking about. Questions like what's a usual morning in this home and its most bizarre feature or quirk against things that are unique and personal to it, and an overall feeling or an experience, which is basically the predominant character of a home against its prominent against the prominence likes and dislikes. A little bit about why I think it's important to look at the character of a home is when we look at mass housing, we see homes as units or cells being multiplied in the most efficient manner possible. I believe that it would be interesting to explore and think about these units as homes of varied or different characters than homes with banal aspects of 2-bedroom versus 3-bedroom or an attached toilet or things of that sort. The character is basically what enables that feeling or experience within a home. And I think it's more conducive to making memories. I think it seems a little bit abstract because of which I started listing down what these feelings are or what these experiences could be. So here are some of the aspects that I think add to the character of a home. I've conducted a survey on homes in mid and high-rise buildings, and these aspects serve as a trigger for a user to think of their homes through this lens. Further, word clouds are presented to link these aspects and recognize character tags that identify with their home. So I'd like to read out these aspects and also present the word clouds that were also presented in the survey. So is it stiflingly hot in summer and numbingly cold in winter, deliciously cool in summer and cozily warm in winter? Or does it remain at an unyielding constant temperature year-round? And some of the character tags that one might think of are, for example, impenetrable, or airy, or dense, porous, indifferent, constant, moody, etc. Then does it contain voices and screams within it? Or is it the whisper, or is the whisper of you heard across the house? Is it packed with smells of food that your neighbor is cooking, the aroma of wet mud, fragrance of flowers, fruits from a nearby tree? Or is it appallingly devoid of any smell? Some character tags that one might think of are porous, sensitive, sweet-smelling, responsive, cacophonic, etc. Is it a self-contained universe that reinforces the boundaries between the inside and the outside, or does it breach the boundaries between the two and bridge the two? Again, disconnect, dialogue, extroverted, introverted, observant, translucent, layered are some of the character tags. Does it bear its burden in stoic silence, embodying the very soul of the word endurance? Or does it creak and groan and complain at each new demand placed upon it? Customizable, constrained, the house being a taskmaster, demanding, versatile, resistant, generous. Then is it waiting to be unraveled and discovered, or is it straightforward and simple? Does it provide opportunities to hide and be in isolation, or does it let you connect to the sky? And again, there are a set of character tags that I think one might think of when they read this. So the idea was to then pick some of these character tags which identify with your home, and it is not necessary for one to respond to every single sentence. So based on these characters, I have tried to make profiles of 3 different homes. One being my grandparents, one of my own, and one that I've studied through plans and sketches and sections and pictures. So I would like, so all of the profiles have a name, and the name is based on a character of a home, a predominant character of a home. The location describes the surroundings around a home, something that might interest, something that might really affect the character of the home itself. And then there are character tags which have been chosen, and then there are 3 questions which have been spoken about to further elaborate the character of a home. I'd like to read out these profiles, or at least 2 of them. So the first one is called The One with the Tunnel, and the location is near a popular food street. The 4 character tags that identify with this home are adaptable, orderly, dense, and dark. A morning in this house, sitting on the cold floor with a hot drink, constantly interrupted by the pitter-patter of the rain. Most bizarre feature or quirk, one can fully touch the ceiling in one space while feeling significantly small in another. And the predominant character, an almost pleasant yet dense smell lingers around the house, making its way through the dimness and darkness. A closed, long, narrow corridor forms the heart and functioning of the house, making the living spaces feel larger than they actually are. Then the second one is called The Den of Solitude, and the location is that it's located in a town in the suburbs. And the character tags are cozy, unreserved, unorthodox, and contrasting. A morning in this house would be sitting in a cute, cozy balcony with a plant or 2 facing the suburbs. And the most bizarre feature or quirk would be chilling in an open, hot bathtub in the middle of the house facing the balcony. And the predominant character, one would first call the den an introvert with its timid, slender windows and a hidden entry. But that changes completely when one sees the nature of openness from within. And then there is a third house, which is called Gone with the Wind, and the location is far end of a busy city. The 4 tags are airy, cacophonic, contrasting, and green. A morning in this house is peaceful and breezy with a visual connection to the sky. One can fully open up a room on 3 sides, making it feel much bigger than it actually is. And one can experience utmost darkness and brightness with an almost similar coolness throughout the home. The sounds penetrate through the voids and openings, making the home public from within. So the idea of making these 3 profiles is also to look at a home very differently, to try to understand a home very differently, and hence design it differently. I think there is a very mundane and banal aspect of looking at a home today. I think when I compare, I've lived in 2 of these homes, the one on the left-hand side and the one on the right. So what I find interesting is that with the 2 homes that I have lived in, is that I could obviously talk about what it felt like to be in this home, the smell, the darkness, the publicness of it, and easily identify its quirks or a usual morning in this home. And the one thing, and a couple of things that are common between these 2 homes, is that one can experience utmost darkness in some of these spaces. There is a prominent smell in both, and there is no ambiguity in the use of space. But these are some of the similarities. But when I look at the overall character of both of these homes, I would say that they're almost on opposite ends of a spectrum. If there is any spectrum, it's very contrasting in its character, but it has got some similar smaller characters. So as I was mentioning earlier, I conducted a survey, and most of the answers to the aspects on the left-hand side are one of the aspects on the right-hand side. As in, for example, if it is stiflingly hot in summer, for that aspect, the 4 common responses have been constant or indifferent, then responsive or reciprocative, and then absorbs or replicates. And then there were other, which mostly spoke about airy, ventilated, and bright. Similar is the case with the other 4 aspects. And I've picked 5 homes, and the names of the homes are Organized Chaos, Ikigai, Peacock, Delta, and Cozy. So I've put down all of the aspects based on the entry of the users. And if we look at, for example, these 2 homes, they have very similar responses to these aspects of the surroundings, and the home and the surroundings, and the voices and the smells, and how the publicness or the privateness of the home and things of that sort. But it's very interesting to see the 4 character tags that were chosen to finally, or the 4 character tags that describe the predominant character of the home. So the Delta says it's understanding, wise, secure, and secretive, while Cozy says it's translucent, serene, cozy, and luxurious. So of course, I mean, there is no there's no conclusion that I'm trying to make, but it's interesting to see how even the similar aspects might lead to a very different understanding of a character, or a very different character in general. And another example is to see Peacock, which says that it is constant and indifferent, contained and impenetrable, self-contained or an introvert, flexible and has a high endurance, and it allows a connection to the sky. So most of the characters really hint at a very introverted kind of space, but the characters speak about the comfort in the space. It speaks about the beauty, it speaks about how peaceful it is and how cozy it is. Another example would be to look at Organized Chaos and Peacock, and how both of them say that there is an almost similar kind of temperature, or they're indifferent to the temperature on the outside. But it's interesting to see that just constant or indifferent can, house that's constant or indifferent can also be porous and sensitive, and contained and impenetrable. And similar is the case with all of the other aspects. So, I mean, of course, so all of this makes me think of a couple of questions, or makes me question a couple of things, which is how aware does the home make you of its character? And I think that, I believe that determines the extent of characterness in a home. How do you call a home character full of character, or maybe characterless? So I think how aware it makes you sort of answers that question. And how much of a difference or effect does it have on the physicality of the home to truly exhibit some of these characters is the other question that I think of, as in what kind of an effect does it have on the physicality, or how is the physicality of the home to truly exhibit some of these characters? Then so I went on for the other questions, which is a usual morning in this house. And it was interesting to see that chirping of the birds is a usual morning in 3 of these houses. And it's interesting because one of them is on the 17th floor, while the others are on much lower floors. Then there is a most bizarre feature or quirk. And Ikigai says that it's a non-functioning garbage chute, while Delta says that it's a lot of lights and shadows in the night from the city. And I mean, of course, this makes me think of, I'm also trying to look at this in comparison to the character tags that have been chosen for the home. For example, lots of lights and shadows in the night from the city. If this is a predominant character, I wonder if the person, why the person didn't really use the character tag. Of course, it's not to critique the data itself, but to try and observe and make notes of the same. And then the predominant characters. Organized Chaos says that one enters the corridor and it acts as a spine to which each room is connected. It ends up becoming a narrow and congested space, but also allows each room to have its own privacy without interference. And then this sort of talks about the predominant character of Organized Chaos is a particular space, it's a particular corridor, and it's the character of that corridor that becomes the predominant character of the entire home. While if you look at Ikigai, Peacock, and Delta, it talks about an overall character. It says that the whole home is well ventilated and lit, and that becomes this predominant character, or the whole home is cozy, or the whole home is artistic. While cozy talks about a mirror wall being its predominant character. So it's so of course, I mean, one talks about uh, a space while the others talk about an overall character. After this, I try to look at an overall response of the entire survey. So out of 28 people, I think 70 people have said that their homes are constant or indifferent to the surroundings, to the temperature outside or to the climate outside. Then there is only 7 out of 28 have said that the home is completely cut off, it's contained or it's impenetrable in terms of sounds and smells. And then there is 14 out of 28 that say that it's self-contained or it's introverted. 15 on 28 say it's flexible or has high endurance, and 14 on 28 say that it is straightforward and simple. And funnily, I think cozy is the one character tag that has been used very, very often throughout the survey. And I think in the 4 character tags, cozy was the one that was really spoken about. So of course, I mean, it's important. I wonder if it's possible to shift the lens in the way we look at homes today, so that we as designers of space not only focus on the organizational aspects, but others too. Others that are very simple and that are very integral to our daily lives and our daily activities, like just what we feel. How is it when it's raining outside, or how is it when our neighbor is cooking fish, or things of that sort. I think more importantly, it might also make a difference in the expectations of a user from a home and the way a user looks at a home. And the user becomes more sensitive to the experience in living in a particular home. So I would like to conclude this discussion with a couple of questions, and they are: how can one consciously plan for and design the character of a home? Can this change the expectations of a user, making them more aware and conscious of the architectural quality of a home? And can this manner of thinking and design provide for more opportunities in breaking the monotony and mundaneness at the level of the cell of the complex? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Aishwarya. I now request Rutvik to do his presentation.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hello. So it all started when I came up to Plan A during studio discussions, and it reminded me of my own house plan, which is Plan B. The Plan A felt more evocative than the Plan B, and somehow my house plan always felt me mundane. So yeah, so there were a lot of questions like what makes a plan more evocative or expressive? Why is there such a difference felt? But there were no answers. So I started searching for these answers for these questions. So I started with like what makes something banal or less evocative, and like is it the elements of space making or the spatial configuration of the plan or the topology of the plan or lack of scale, light, and proportion in the plan? Does the plan lacks a narrative which makes it non-evocative? So then further, like I started to study the space syntax diagrams of both the plans, and it can be seen that both the plans more or less are similar in a way they function. Both have a corridor which acts as the connecting link between public and private spaces of the house. So then the question arises, why is there such a difference felt in both the house plans? So uh, so like the plan A has different functions placed around the corridor, which makes it more active. Things like placement of a common bathroom itself more activates or the use of the corridor. Also, the connection between both the semi-private spaces of the houses in the is the corridor itself. Whereas in Plan B, the corridor seems like a dead space devoid of activities itself, as its function reduces to only connect the most private and most public sphere of the house and not anything else. So does that mean that more active spaces a house has, more evocative it is? What if I change the location of the kitchen in Plan B and kept it at other end of the corridor? Will it make a difference? Another difference like I felt between both the plans was the way entrance happens into the house. In Plan B, the entrance has a vestibule which is assumed to be a threshold but allows a stranger to gaze through the living room, although being outside the door. Whereas in Plan A, the way a chair is positioned, the person is not only able to view the street uh, and the entryway to the building from the window on the left, but also creates a threshold to the apartment itself with a direct line of sight to the front door of the right. Uh, what is the threshold in an apartment then? Like, is it defined by a space, or like in case of Plan A, uh, it's simply the orientation of furniture with respect to the entrance. A similar comparison can be made of the viewing space in the raised sitting enclave of Adolf Blue's Moller house, where the occupant sitting on the couch placed against the window in the interior space above the able to guard the space. Similarly, to the person in the Plan A could by detecting movement both at the threshold of the house outside and in the interior itself. So how threshold adds to the spatiality of the house? What relation does it have to the overall organization of the house? To understand a better relation of threshold to the organization of house, few plans from Indian context were also studied. uh, Interestingly, in both the plans, the living rooms are seen as a threshold space where all the public activities could be carried out without interfering the private domain of the house. Uh, in the Muller house, for instance, the sequence of the spaces articulated around the staircase allows an increasing sense of privacy as we move towards the heart of the house. So, like in Indian context, what is the heart of the house, or like what the house unfold itself to? Uh, Another question, like I was looking over, was like, how does materiality affect the way housing is perceived? In one of the article titled "Homing and Unhoming," the author talks of warm familiarity that comes with the terrazzo floors. So the author quotes, "The flooring in the new house comprised machine-made ceramic tiles, unlike the terrazzo flooring of the earlier house. The property dealer showing me the house had explained that the tiles give a clean look to the house, unlike terrazzo flooring that always appears unclean and old. A neighbor who also has the tile flooring in her house explains they give a neat look. So we all get them done. But it's also more work for us to keep it clean because you can see everywhere speck of dust and hair on it. So how do we choose the right material? It is also seen that people tend to attach memories to uh, certain materials faster, uh, to like certain kind of materials, as they allow certain kind of activities to perform. For example, during the memories exercise we did in the studio, some of the people associated their memories to materials like rough plaster simply because it allowed the person to rub thermocol on it. Also, the memory of coolness of Kota stone during a summer afternoon was something which created a deep sense of belonging to the place. So, why are the aspects like scale, proportion, or materiality not considered in a design? Uh, Coming to the circulation and visual connection in a house, I think these are two most neglected aspects of design in modern apartments. If you see Adolf Loos work, upon entering Loos interiors, one's body is continually turned around to face the space one just moved through, rather than the upcoming space or the space outside, which with each turn, each return loop, the body is arrested. It is interesting that one how one perceives the house itself. I mean, we never realize which space did we just move from. A modern apartment has no provision to look back into itself. It's just a continual journey. The apartment never falls into itself. Another questions come up is what if the house has two entrances? It changes the whole dimension of the space. Suddenly, the house has two faces to orient to. So, like in this frame, I was like questioning who is the user. Like, if different users have different perspective for the same element, then how to incorporate everything? This made me question the perspective from which a plan is studied. Who is the user and whose perspective the plan is being read? What if we consider the perspective of a housewife and compare both the given plans? Plan A has a kitchen situated on the extreme corner of the house, whereas Plan B has an open kitchen located in a very close proximity with the living room. Interestingly, in the essay Home, the Experience of Atmosphere, author talks about the spatial relation between kitchen and living room, and there the opinions differ widely. A mother expressed her preference for an open kitchen that's also nice because when I'm in the kitchen and the whole family is here, you are so shut away, it's not so pleasant. Yet the visual relation between kitchen and living room is the reason others do not favor the open kitchen. Another woman added, pans scattered all around, dirty plates, and dishes piled up for everybody to look at gave her an unpleasant feeling. What if a person from New York is asked to compare the two plans? Will that person feel the same as me? Is it because the plan is typical? It is felt banal. Is it a dilemma that who we are designing for and what we are designing? Or why do we want to design an evocative plan? The answer was simple, to make a house a home. So, what is a home? The definition of home may mean one thing to someone, but have countless meanings to others. So, how can we design to cater these things? Hence, I was then searching for more generalized and definitive meaning of home. Interestingly, R.S. Deshpande in his book uh, Modern Ideal Homes for India defines meaning of a home in a very rational way, as a set of spaces allocated to specific functions. What if the what if both the plans are seen as a set of spaces which fulfill specific function? Then which one defines more appropriately the meaning of home? And all these array of questions, I end up with this sort of mind map, uh, connecting all the dots to resolve this quest. That's it. Thank you for being the part of my journey, and would request everyone to pitch in their thoughts in this never-ending quest for the better one. Thank you.
Thank you, Rutvik. Well, so I think a very interesting, set of questions about the meaning of home, and I think very often when we are doing mass housing projects, I think this question suffers a lot in the sense that there is a natural sort of rationale to the idea of repeating the units and creating a mass housing, or what makes housing mass housing, in which the idea of the home is primarily seen as a question of organization of spaces, um, and therefore the plan diagram, I would say, becomes the most important tool of design. And I think what all three presentations are trying to uh, uh, search for is, where is the home in all of this? The place which is a container of your memories. Where is the place which has all the quirks and idiosyncrasies? Uh, and how do we as designers start engaging with them? uh, I also like I find this quite intriguing, that all these three presentations in all these three presentations, you're asking the same question, but asking it from very different perspectives, or in very different ways. um, Jaya, who talks about the poetics of it, and the quest for where is the poetic in architecture, or Aishwarya, who actually I was hoping that we'll actually see, like, prepared the three for the first three apartments. I thought we'll see for the others as well, but I'm quite fascinated by the idea of a dating app, Tinder kind of app for homes, uh, where the homes are not sold based on how many BHK, but just this app. And it would be a very fascinating way of buying and selling homes, and it will force designers to look at it differently. And I think Rutvik's sort of meandering search in this, which I think the last slide, so he showed it in bits and pieces, but when he showed the zoomed out version, I think really captures how his mind has been wandering through this sort of huge area of. And what is also interesting is that everyone in this session is leaving open ended, or rather ending with questions, uh, or asking for suggestions rather than coming up definitive answers. So that I thought was also very interesting. So I would like to open it up to everyone. If anyone has questions or would like to comment or after this discussion. Participants can, presenters can also discuss it.
I was just wondering how much of the home is, then the character of the home sort of is brought out through the residents vis-a-vis the space itself. Like I wanted to know, like from Aishwarya's sort of thing.
Yeah, when I was doing the survey, I was a little worried about what is the role of interiors and what is the role of the personalization, and if people would take to that to sort of describe the character of a home. But I think the aspects of, for example, the home and its awareness of its surroundings, or how, whether it's more cut off, whether it's allowing one to connect to the sky, things of these sort are I believe are architectural qualities that might not really be affected by the, or might not really be skewed or by the customization of the space, which definitely also adds to the character of the home. But it is not something that I was sort of looking for. But I do believe that customization and personalization also adds very much to the character of the home from within, what it feels like, what it looks like. But yeah, I mean, the overall feeling that you have, or the overall experience that you have within a home, might have to do more with the architecture itself, the orientation, the architectural manifestations, um, over customization.
Yeah, but I think that's a very interesting question that we can sort of elaborate even further, that how much of that character is part of the architecture of that home, or is sort of encapsulated in the architecture of it, which cannot be modified through interiors or personalization. How much of it can be? That is one question. The other question that how do we as architects look at this entire process? There again, I think historically been divergent views as to how much can or should interior design or personalization change the character of space. And I also find it interesting that architects seem to have very different viewpoints or positions vis-a-vis this. Not only that, sometimes positions also seem to be building typology specific. Uh, at least I would, after modernism, generally most architects, the position that most architects take is that the architecture gives character to spaces, and therefore even the interiors or personalization of this should be in consultation with the architects. And I think especially in architecture, this can be seen playing out in many different ways. for example, Frank Lloyd Wright, who insists designing the furniture as well as the cutlery and the tableware, table napkins in the house, because he considered it to be a seamless design exercise. Where or Miss Vandaro also, who would be very particular about what furniture to place and what kind of carpet to place. On one side is this idea of total design, uh, and on the other side is this idea, at least when it comes to housing, some architects, say in the Indian context, someone like Doshi in LIC housing, or Charles Correa in Belapur housing, talking of incremental housing and people making changes and personalization. And uh, so I think that is another question: to what extent do we as architects look at the power of interiors or furniture to change the character of design? Some people believe that you can design the architecture robust enough that it can sort of subsume any kind of personalization and still not lose its inherent character. I think others look at architecture as a very delicate design act, where changing even one thing in that will completely destroy the ambience of that space. And in the context of housing, that becomes an interesting question, because architects do not have, and especially in mass housing, because architects have no control over what users would do. So in that scenario, how do we get character of houses, uh, and the degree of personalization that can be done, uh, and I think whether character itself, I mean, it came across in the tags that were there in Aishwarya's presentation. I don't think it is about identifying the right character or the most dominant character, because it was very clear that different people were probably interpreting that differently, or interpreting the character differently. So personally, I don't think it's about getting the character right, but it is more about thinking of from that perspective, that uh, uh, I mean, like you were showing in the first profile of those three houses, where you're not identifying it by the project name or by its location or by BHK or by, but you're forced to some other description of the house. That itself, I think, will force us as architects to think differently. Because imagine if I start the house project by creating a Tinder profile for the house, so that it gets sold quickly. So you have to sort of embellish the profile of the house, and for sure it cannot be done in terms of square footage or attached bathrooms or anything of that.
I have a question. So, when we are talking about character of a home, we were looking at various interpretations of the unit plan. But when we are also thinking of mass housing and high-rise housing, if the same unit, even if it has been thought of with a very good character and spatial qualities, when repeated so many times, will it still have that same character? And then what is at the end the character of the whole housing?
Yeah, but I think, for example, a family or a person lives in one house at a time. So even if it's being repeated, you sort of experience the character of the home because you're living in that home. So I think um, I don't think the quality of a dark corridor, for example, goes away just because there's a dark corridor in every house in the housing complex, or that it becomes maybe mundane or it becomes repetitive. But of course, just like a housing complex has like 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 different types of homes with, for example, 2 BHK, 3 BHK, one with attached toilet, one without, or whatever. If we could have, instead of that, if we could have 5, 6 homes with varied characters where you have, 5 to 6 different types of characters, I think it might really make a difference. Um, yeah. And yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to sort of look at the character of the entire housing complex itself. Which is something I haven't thought of. I've only been looking at the character of the home, but what is the character of the building? Or if just by putting together these homes with certain characters, is that going to have an overall effect to the housing complex itself? Does that bring about a different type of character? I'm not very sure. Something that I would also like to think about.
It also sort of ties back to the previous question about character of a house, in the sense that, for example, if I imagine that the School of Architecture building is completely plastered and painted, and the exposed concrete is also plastered or painted, and the railings, instead of railings I have parapets, and flooring is granite flooring. Okay, what would it do to how you feel about the space, and how much would it change? What is the degree of change in character you would feel because of the change in finishes? Because this what Aishwarya was saying, that the possibility of having 3-4 different characters of houses, same scheme, our reaction to it is to have 3-4 different layouts. So when people say different housing types in the same scheme, they are essentially of different plans. Exactly like you mentioned, 2 BHK, 3 BHK, for example. So I just remove one bedroom from the plan and it becomes a 2 BHK, or it is one without an attached toilet, or one with a larger balcony. So this is seen only in terms of difference in layout. So is it possible, for example, that the layout remains the same, but the character is completely different? Is it possible through materiality, texture, because it is mirrored and therefore light is coming from an opposite direction? Can I leverage all that and make a house with a different character but with the same plan? That could also be a very interesting exercise.
But like mirroring itself won't change the character of the house itself. Like,
Yeah, you will have to work upon it. That if you realize that by mirroring, in one house you are getting evening light and in the other house you are getting morning light, and then you start playing with your flooring or something else in order to change that. Again, it's an open question. Are you saying that because the plan layout, so according to you, do you say that this modification I do to the School of Architecture building will not change its character? If I and paint it and make it granite, I know it's a dangerous question to answer. Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Yes,
Kash, can I?
yeah.
Yeah. So I just joined in between, but what you are just saying, like, whether having the same space or the same plan, and having a difference in the character that is experienced. I mean, one of the way it's usually implemented is, all the hotels that are there, all the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star hotels. And then each hotel we read that there's a room called deluxe, there's a room called premium, there's a room called XYZ. Essentially, the way in which these hotels are planned is all the room sizes are same. except the I would say suite, and where there's an additional lounge or exit. But otherwise, the essential framework that they come with is that the plan must be the same, and then they should be able to upgrade or degrade the unit based on the market, the way in which it performs over a longer period of time. So the deluxe unit will have an Italian in your bathroom and a flooring, but the paint on the wall surface that you will get is a royal paint or XYZ. The deluxe unit will have a replica of an artwork, versus the premium unit will have an original artwork. So the light fixture that is spent here, it's a range fix which says 3,000 rupees per wall hang fixtures, 5,000 rupees for wall. So it's the brickwork is the same, the plaster is the same, the plumbing is the same, faucet changes, basin changes. So and that's what and after every 5 years, or there's a cycle which they have economical model of. After that room technique, in a reality, it gets demolished and changes into something, a different entity based on what market is happening outside. So this is there somewhere, and people in housing usually it has already started, where people say similar thing, deluxe unit, classic. It's something which has to do with what it will offer, or what nature of feel it might have, or how the treatment or the articulation of various stuff that will engage into it. And that's what the same apartment gets sold at 2 different prices. Same plan, everything. That's something which is being practiced currently. And in extension of what we were just discussing about the character, and that was interesting. One thing I would add is the way it is, the way we are forced to do things, and the way we are forced to design is not forced, I would say, but the way perhaps if you likes, vibrant, can make it vibrant, having a set of framework which still refer to all of it, because it is mass housing, because it's not a Frank Lloyd Wright house. In Frank Lloyd Wright house, everything must be in a certain way. In a mass housing, it will obviously lose that the maybe the tagging of what it should result into, or what it should feel to me, because it doesn't become, it no longer belongs to you. I mean, it no longer belongs to an architect. It belongs to the person who is going to occupy, and that person's age is going to change. The person's life is different. The person's income is different. The person's occupation is different, and all of it reflects in that unit, which we see in images. The way people treat their washes, the way people treat their living rooms, the way we treat even working desks, simple stuff. It reflects what we are as a person in some or the other way. And what eventually becomes is how do we cater to as many different people without changing the interest of the architect, where the building does not get abused by their random changes or by unfulfilled desires, which eventually users take up on their own, and they will actually do things which are not in the interest of the project and the long run and the life of the project, etc., etc. So that's there. And the other question which somebody asked is, when not question, but like, how do we offer the character can change in terms of its scale. So like at site, it must be open-ended or free or porous, At a unit level, it can still be closed and contained. At a corridor level, it still can be airy and whatever. So not necessarily there's a unified character that goes across. Mostly it's not, and mostly it's like you actually say that okay, at that scale, that's what one wants to offer. At this scale, this is what I want to offer, or this is what I should offer, maybe like, and then you actually have an orchestra of different characters, which eventually becomes our memory. So for example, all the housing board projects, but it's like you never, even any projects, we usually never feel that my home ends at my door. We feel that even this they write, Sarkari Wasahat, and then even in our head, the board is also my home. I mean, the front board which they put up at the gate, the metal gate which is broken is also my home. I mean, you eventually, the nature of time that is spent into, you actually absorb all of it. The bigger tree that is there, the smaller thing that is there, and I mean, all of it. It eventually becomes memory and character, maybe like something of that sort. And yeah,
It is actually, it is interesting that, like you're saying, actually a lot of housing is now sold as premium housing or luxury housing. Just
yeah,
like, I mean, it's a very interesting analogy of where you have deluxe rooms. And I personally really like the term semi-deluxe room, like
yeah,
you
very
want,
much.
yeah, you want the deluxe room, but you don't
It
want to
goes with
spend so much.
it just it goes with 1.5 BHK and 2.5 BHK.
Yes. So this what I find interesting in all this is there is it is definitely talking about affordability, or it is from a perspective that this characterization is essentially done, premium luxury. Whereas when we talk of human beings and their quirks or idiosyncrasies, or humans as having characters, that someone is very jovial, someone is very reserved, whatever that might be, not termed in terms of your affordability or class, right? And so it would be interesting to look at affordability. I mean, from a perspective which does not necessarily touch on what is the class, how expensive that house is, or how affordable or how cheap that house is, because I mean. From that lens, character of a house is primarily can be changed through finishes. Probably, my sense is that was sort of Rutvik's apprehension towards me saying that how much of a character of a home can change with finishes, because I think somewhere deep down as architects we feel that that is very cosmetic or superficial in nature, that you
Which is
just
not.
change a wall. Yeah.
Which is
Uh,
absolutely not. I mean, it's like it. If we say if we just extend the same like thing where you say, let's say if I'm traveling to Bombay, and if I'm having a if I'm supposed to book a room for myself, okay, which the city where I don't belong to, or maybe a city where I belong, whatever, whether I'm purchasing a house, I mean the relationship is the same, I mean, the phenomenon is the same. So I have the option of spending 15,000 rupees to Aberoi and to Taj, and the same category of a room, same size. Actually, all the hotels or all whatever they follow the same square feet. It's not like some room is bigger, some room is smaller. It's not like that. If you buy a deluxe room, it could be 0.square feet, big and small. Eventually, there's but I would prefer to go to Aberoi and not this and not that. Or everybody will have their choice for that that room or this category or that one, and that is where where the finishes are still the same. It's the same beige Italian marble which is applied there. It is the same cost of curtain which is lying there. That's where the differentiation, which is not, it's not very conscious choice that I make, but I know that I feel relaxed here and I feel little stressed or maybe little, I mean, this makes me, here I can close down myself, here I cannot close down myself. And that's the nature of choices we keep on making, even at campus also. When I stand on this side of the railing towards North Lawn, I feel in a certain way. The same railing is there on the other side, but then I'm going to feel this space of a balcony is also same. But then eventually you begin to feel different. You, even though scale of each most of the studios are same, but still the first year studio which is right in the corner, I'm saying first year studio of the earlier time, Kashi might be like the one with the jutting balcony on the other side. So as such, all of them are 10-11 meter span, but I mean, we have a very distinctive memory of each studio for a very, very specific reason. There's a same brick, there's the same quota, there's the same railing, there's the same wooden door. So,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, there are a lot of things that are at play, which I mean, it becomes more critical to register them. Then you can apply. Else it's like I feel it, but I don't know why I feel it, and most of the time that's what struggle becomes like.
So incidentally, I think this is the last, you're talking to the last batch we did their first year in that studio that you're
Oh
talking
wow,
of.
great, thank God, thank God.
Yes. Indu had a question in which he put up on the chat regarding gender and housing, using the example of the kitchen and the open kitchen. So yes, I think although this was not specifically in any of these three presentations, but we have been discussing this in class, and especially the open kitchen, because I think this uh, closed kitchen versus open kitchen debate is very fascinating, where a lot of architects and also how it is portrayed in scenes now, there is definitively a push towards an open kitchen, and it's not as easy as it sounds exactly because this idea of messiness. Uh, but I think one could also, I suppose one could also discuss this question of character from a gendered perspective as to depending on who you're talking of, whether it's someone who is dealing with a different set of responsibilities as compared to someone else, would they think of it differently, or would they look at it differently? Uh, so for the people who just presented, Jaya, Aishwarya, Rutik, what do you think about, how do you look at gender in relation to character of a house? I mean, any thoughts on that?
So, like in one of the previous readings, also that we did in studio, it was based on genders, and it talked about how a house is always talked about as an ownership of a woman and not men. Like whenever you go to your grandmother's house, you say you're going to your grandmother's house and not your grandfather's house. Something as simple as that. And how those kind of small things do affect how we look at genders in housing especially. And
So actually, that make that reminds us of that reading, and I think it's also very interesting to see post-industrial revolution, this entire split of the office from the home, sharpened this gender divide, especially when it comes to housing. Actually, even today, when I look at uh, there are a lot of houses in the city where the men work from home. Okay, so in Ahmedabad, for example, when I look at some potter communities who are staying in Ramapur or Sarkej Rosa, where they have their potter studio at home. So the men are also working at home and the women are also working at home, in the sense they are cooking, they are taking care of the kid. Where men and women are working in the same place, there is a much better recognition of what is work and what is not work, in the sense that both partners can see that the other one is busy, and therefore the notion of shared responsibility, in the fact that both are working, is by and large felt much more. Whereas the moment this divide happened, there is lot written, especially in the British context, that post-industrial revolution, when primarily men started working outside the house, suddenly the woman, the house became the woman's domain and a woman's responsibility. And this whole idea that women have to take care of it and women have to uphold the dignity of it. So I think from that time onwards, in it has been a slippery slope when it comes to gender and housing. Um Both in terms of, I mean, this notion that the woman has to uphold the honor of the home, or protect the honor of the home, but also this, because place got separated from home, the idea that the home is not a place of work, that the men are working, and a woman who is not working outside the house is essentially a housewife, right? And therefore is not doing anything productive. I think the other angle which has dovetailed into it is the way in which economy is measured these days, from in terms of your GDP. That actually, according to modern economic, work that is done where money does not change hands is not right. The definition of work is uh, uh, based on money changing hands. So if you are working for free, working. So if I'm cooking at home, or if I'm doing jhadu pocha and I'm not getting paid for it, then I'm not working. I'm just whiling away my time, or I'm not being productive. Or if I'm taking care of a child at home. So what I feel in is that if you hire a nanny, then you have to pay that nanny to take care of it. But if someone is doing it for free, then it is not work. So uh, yes, I think Hindu, to answer your, not to answer, but I think it's an important point that you brought out, which right now in this seminar per se, we have probably not touched upon much, the idea of gender in housing. But yeah, I have many dimensions, question of gender and how they look at housing, look at the home differently. Uh, so yeah, coming back to this question of character of housing, I also would like to put it against the first set we had, which was about flexibility and adaptability, where we were talking of the whole idea that let people do what they want to do, and for you to one position there is, you don't even design the interior layout, you just give it like floor space, like in an office complex. uh, I would like to sort of put that against this thought, which is talking about designing the character of the house, which means that you have to commit to a certain materiality, a certain proportion, and I have no answers to it, but I that these two are very different modes of thinking, and personally I'm not able to choose between the two because I see the value of both. That on one hand you're saying that families change so much, their desires change, so good strategy is to let them do what they want, and on the other hand is to say no, we are professionals, we are designing a home, and the home is where a lot of lot of events which lead to memorable situations take place, birth, marriage, death, or even day to day occurrences, heartbreak, so and many others. And therefore it has to be the professional get in and design a house is evocative, that where you feel deeply connected to the house, and that evocative, I think someone was talking atmospheres, Peter Zumthor, that evocative will come, or even Jaya was talking of the senses, about seeing, hearing, touching, uh, uh, and smelling and tasting, that one will have to make that space evocative and therefore finally curate it. Yeah. So I wonder if any of you, I mean, both the presenters now and the presenters, if you have any thoughts on that, how do you see the both of this together?
I think, I mean, I just have a like a similar question in that regard. That
Uh,
how definitive is, or how definitely are we thinking of spaces in terms of character? I mean, do we say that if I create this thicker parapet, it's going to evoke a character? How tangible is that character to how we're actually designing? Because I think character in general, though it's conscious to who it's very intangible and unconscious as well. And I'm not sure. I mean, how do we say that this particular, if I design this way, or if I design the balcony this way, it's going to evoke this particular character? Should it even be that defined, or should it not be?
hmm. No, yeah, definitely. I would say that can never be sure that what you have imagined as the character of the house is whether what you have imagined is what you have designed. And for sure one cannot predict whether you have imagined and designed is the end user will feel, and that there is going to be a lot of loss in that translation. But I would say that I mean, if I were to extend that argument further, wouldn't it mean then that nothing matters, everything is fine? Anyways, you cannot curate it. So, जिसको जो करना है, you even need an architect then.
I mean, no. I mean, what I mean is that when we're designing, do we consciously think that I'm to provoke this particular character and designing this way? Or do we say that in general, this is the character of the home and I'm designing it? Do we specifically look at spaces in detail, saying that this particular detail will evoke this character? Or
I think there are two slightly different questions. One is, do we predetermine the character of the house where we are designing? So, do I sort of consciously try and make a peaceful house, for example? One question is, can I even make a peaceful house if I want to make a peaceful house, or a very finicky house, or a very orderly house, or any of the tags that I was talking about? One question is, can I actually do it? Will the user feel the same? Second question is, do it? Should I make an entire housing scheme which has predetermined characters, either one And the other question you're asking is that when I'm designing the window or when I'm doing a detail, can the character affect the designing of it? Somehow personally I feel that the last one, at the level of detail, definitely I think the character of that element does affected by scale, proportion, material, uh, and all the tools that we as architects have. Asking the first question, should we design a scheme where half the houses are scary and half the houses are fidgety? How do we take the call which character to design for? Uh, then, yeah, I think that's an open question.
I think one thing that for me these set of presentations bring out, especially Aishwarya's presentation, is the sense that what we're building today, we're seeing issues of things becoming too mundane, or everybody feeling that, or like a large group of people feeling that the house is indifferent, or mundane, or uh, too introverted, so in one way there is also the fact that three out from a group of 11 students even chose topics that are so like almost want to go in the opposite direction of where we started, right? Like in our studio we were like, let's look at constraints, let's look at contingencies, and now we're that we chose to select something that is completely opposite. It's almost like rebelling against what housing is currently talking about, or what we're currently preoccupied with in housing. And so in that sense, I also feel like it's a recognition of the mood, in some ways, as to how, what, like as a tool for analysis when we talk about character, as to what is happening in the current way that we're pre-embedded ideas of what an apartment living needs to be, both in design and sort of construction or the developer kind of world.
So can I put forward a point?
Yeah, go ahead, Shrey.
So I was wondering about this idea of us being in control of the characteristic of a space, because I mean, it is quite confusing considering that given the boundary of taking a space in, like, our buildings or our creation taking space at a particular point, given like a coordinate xyz cannot be a repetitive characteristic of the z coordinates would never be the same. Thus I think like no space can ever make you feel like we can never be in total control, is what I'm wondering upon, because given that the coordinates might be different, it would turn out to be a different experience. A guy with the same plan on the 8th floor might be getting a good view or might be more distracted by the view, while somebody in the first floor might, with the same characteristics, might feel something else because of the given position, relative position.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I would completely agree that we can never be in total control. Nor can we be certain about what is the character we are creating. And like, even if I repeat the same on the first floor and on the 14th floor, it is going to be different. Yeah. But having said that, I would also say that definitely forms, proportion, materiality plays a role in the experience of that space, and that uh, it matters. We can never be sure whether we have been able to translate, transpose what we were thinking into the minds of what people are thinking. That is pointless. But at the same time, I do feel that uh, uh, there is something called taste, and taste is not, it can never be formulaic one. So if I look at taste, say in food, for example, I could, I mean, I could take my mother's recipe and follow it to the T and still not get the taste, right? But what is in, and also there is lot of individual uh, tastes are individual. Some people like spicy food, some people don't like spicy food. But I would still say that one can at times say that this food is tasteless, or this food is bland, or it is not as yum as another person cooking the same dish. And there is in that sense very tangible about character, that it can be felt. Maybe we can't describe it for sure, we have a formula by which to make it, but I mean, again, personally, uh, uh, I do think that when I go to some spaces I feel something. Okay, it might be personal. I could not guarantee that everyone in the world will do that, but definitely when I go to some places I feel something, when I go to other places I do something. I also feel that there could be proportionately, there could be some spaces where proportionally larger number of people feel something, and there could be spaces where proportionately fewer number of people feel something. Yeah, it's just like taste. I think it is very easy to feel it. You don't have to anyone or do anything to feel it, but at the same time it is very difficult to design it. And maybe that is but to me the more important question in the domain of seeing is that if someone is doing a museum project, or if someone is doing a theater project or a school project or something else, they primarily approach architecture from this character or experience perspective, form, scale, order, and so on, financial part, which are also important even in a museum project or a school project. Whereas when it comes to housing, because we are saying that we cannot disregard the regulatory and the financial aspects of the project, why do we feel that we cannot make spaces with character? Why do you feel that making spaces with character is not the primary aim? They should not be seen as independent, or it's not a either or thing, that either it will be feasible and marketable and saleable, or it can be evocative, but never both. I think that is what in this studio we are trying to solve it, right? Hopefully.
That's a good. Would having maximum number of variety into characteristics be a more successful housing scheme because it caters to a wide range of people? I mean, I'm just thinking.
I don't know. See, if you're thinking of it at the project level, then you might take that call that the same building should have as many different characteristics as possible. But the other way to do it is to take the call at the level of the one project can be biryani and the other project can be pani puri. Why should project have all the tastes? It depends on it also depends what is the scale of the project, because if you're doing a large township kind of project, 10-hectare site and thousands of houses, versus if you're doing a small plot with only 50 houses, I suppose you would also think differently, because the moment it goes to one scale, then I would be wary with all of them being pani puris, because then you are creating ghettos in the city where different parts of the city have different flavors. But at the level of the building, I'm not sure whether that kind of a Bhel approach would really be what I suppose you could do it. I mean,
So I had a question. Like I was wondering, like till what extent can we think about the evocativeness of a house in a urban housing scheme? Because I think that in that sense, any housing. But I'm just speaking because those places which are hello. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Rishikesh.
Hello. Yeah, we hear you.
sorry, I missed that entire question.
We as well.
No, one thing what Kashi you said about also what is coming up uh, is for by if we talk about character or feel, when you said I when I go to X space I feel something, when we go to Y. In case of housing also, what happens is even if I'm not designing for a specific character, I'm actually designing for a character, which the question becomes whether the resultant character is coming out of my choice or of my decision making, or it is coming on its way or by default by something which is not a step by step thought, or something which is a recipe which I am generating thoughtfully in my consciousness, or it's just coming up maybe by working on the requirement, addressing the scale of the project, XYZ. So if we just say how people make choices, let's say as many of you are there, like we know when anybody chooses to have a house, that person will go to 10 projects, 15 projects, and will visit range of the areas which one is preferring and XYZ. So they will have set of criteria that okay, I want to live in this area. This is a budget. That's the kind of family or social need that I have, and so I'm locating myself. I mean, this is something which I was doing one small questionnaire. I was working on that, where just to figure out not exactly like what works, but just to understand how people make choices, or what are the influencing factors for housing, or what should be the influencing factors for housing in the sheer interest of users, where you remove the profitability, where you remove the financial burdens, when you remove all these stupid things which comes up with the market, and specifically focus on human mind, feeling, whatever, like how and when I choose something, when somebody takes up this house versus that house, and what was the differentiating factor? Something was cheaper than the previous one, the area was bigger, this was there, but still that person goes for it because that person relates with that character. It could be the quality, it could be the brightness, it could be the light, it could be the openness of the house, it could be something what you see through from that house. It could be when you open the door, what you feel, whether the breeze comes, like it invites you like that, or a bedroom is dingy, or in a toilet you smell something, a kitchen doesn't feel big enough, though it is big. There are 14, 15 square, feet kitchens and 15 by 12, but that space doesn't feel big versus the same space or smaller than that in some other house. Suddenly you feel, okay, I'm actually big. So it's those characters. Only thing is, what happens is the question for architects becomes whether I have chosen that or it is happening. Because even though when you are not making a character of a home, you are actually making a character of a home. Only thing is, after making that, to what extent I can edit, to what extent I can influence, and to what extent I can reorient as per my awareness for that product.
Yeah.
So
I think this is precisely what I was trying to bring out, that there is a certain embedded notion of what an apartment, what we're trying to design when we're designing apartments, or whether we're aware of it as much as possible, as much or not, is something that I wanted to kind of emphasize, both from the designer's perspective of whether we get so preoccupied by everything else that, not that we're still, again, I think this conversation Aishwarya and I were also having about, whether something can actually be characterless. Like, does that exist? Can a home be characterless? And I think that's precisely what
it's like we just spoke about food also. Like, somebody said about the food. The thing is, why everybody's, a large number of people are mad about McDonald's. Why all of them like McDonald's chips or French fries, and why there's a formula. Like whether you buy it in Ahmedabad or in Madras, the taste is the same because of the formula. So that's the strength of the formula. The thing is, they have recognized that if I do this process after this process, and if I do this much temperature for this minute, if I do this, then this stays, and then I can sell it. I can guarantee that nobody, no matter who will taste it, is going to smell the same characteristic. No matter how that person works, who the person is, what the age is, how the occupation of that person, the economy, you are going to taste the same thing, and then you are going to go after that taste. That's why they are popular. Else it won't sustain. I mean, if I'm just saying McDonald's because it serves to large number of people, and we are talking about mass housing. So that's the basic relationship I'm establishing, nothing else. But it's like I mean, that's the question. I also I mean, that was there at some. Can I have something which I can recognize and which I can then play with? I can't play if I'm not being able to say, okay, यहाँ से कुछ हो रहा है. If I play this, then this thing comes. Then I can make a rhythm, because I know now buttons and I can choose the buttons. So the rhythm that comes out is of my choice, not what instruments want to do. Else it's like, yeah, you get carried away by what other forces are. So I mean, yeah, it's eventually the formula. Mostly, I feel we are still weak in having our formulas. We are still weak in able to maybe put it in some way so that somebody else can carry forward. And that's the tragedy. I'm like, why somebody cannot take up the spirit of Laurie Baker, because that there is a formula, but it's not as simple as somebody can take it up. So it seems complex, and so I can't repeat. So that's why it gets dead. But it is possible that if we establish something as a system, probably that can be repeated. That's what that's what Google is doing. That's what Facebook, and that's why they are making money, and that's why they are getting popular. They have an algorithm which they can use to get the result which they want, and not something which happens by fluke or by feel, because feeling can be manipulated, taste can be manipulated, minds can be manipulated. That's what they are. I mean, that's what they are playing for. So house, I mean, yeah, home, it can be manipulated in a big way, and all of us do that. But for yeah, I know I'm just doing little random,
Yeah.
but
I would like to say something.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
I'll just
Go ahead, Aishwarya.
Yeah, I was just, I'm not sure if there is a formula for mouse housing. I'm sure there's a formula maybe we could come up with multiple formulas.
There's no standard formula. I'm saying there could be number of formulas where you can choose, which can be a piece, which can be a toolkit. Where I say, if it's a cooperative housing, I should use these elements of that formula. I should recompose it this way and that way, and then it becomes a rhythm for myself. And then I will differ from some other architect, or this is the value addition which as an architect I bring into versus what somebody else will bring into. So that's why A.R. Rahman is different from Shankar Ehsaan Loy. They are both are using piano. But just the sequence or this, whatever, I'm just like, that's what changes the tune.
So the difference between A.R. Rahman and Shankar Ehsaan Loy, for example, is what they as people, as singers, bring to the table. If there was a formula, then I think like we could just feed it into the computer and like we can have extremely efficient mass housing, and it's easy to sort of produce something of that sort. But what really brings character was something that unique to anybody's product, whatever they produce is what they bring to the table as a person, right? So otherwise, so both A.R. Rahman and the other singer, both of them use the piano. Both of them have a similar type of voice. But what is it that is differentiate?
The reason why this I could be entirely wrong. But I'm just saying based on what I have understood, researched, and figured out. Just as a part of question, similar like open-ended question, the reason why A.R. Rahman could penetrate into international market was because he has an algorithm. He has the formulas, and which he implies, and that's the reason why he repeats his success in a certain ratio. Else, it's not possible. And this is something which actually I came to know through a book, where he himself has agreed that's what. It's not accessible to all of us. So we think ये creativity से होता है. I'm not saying नहीं होता, but creativity was also there into finding standardization, which can play the role which it needs to play at that moment, for that occasion, for that song, or for that situation. It doesn't come randomly, and which can then make it local. Which can make, so he can, if he's playing if he's composing a Kannada song, he will play in a certain way. He's playing a Hindi song, he knows that that's the genre and that's the reach I need to, so he will do certain things. And if he's saying that this song must get Oscar, I'm not saying all of it will get, but that will something different. And if you hear it, and I'm sure all of you have, that's what changes. The character of song changes there.
Yeah, I think probably the confusion is also happening because of the way we define formula, in the sense that the McDonald's French fries formula, Aishwarya, like you're saying, if someone is able to steal it, then they can replicate it. But what Dhaval is talking of A.R. Rahman's formula is not a single formula that will automatically generate all pieces of music, but these are will be bits and pieces of understanding of what should be the relationship between two piano strokes, or when should the pitch go high, when should the pitch go low. So there will be like a set of rules that he might have set up for himself, and they are not, in a sense, they are not formulaic in nature, that A.R. Rahman still is required to take that formula and make music out of it. That if that diary is stolen by someone else, they cannot make it. But for sure, I mean, you cannot deny that when you hear A.R. Rahman songs, you can with reasonable amount of surety you can say that this is A.R. Rahman. So there is, like someone is saying in chat, there is a certain pattern that the mind recognizes. But I just wanted to bring sort of another point. In fact, I was listening to a lecture on YouTube given by someone who runs this firm called Commons. All across USA, they are into co-living housing. So you can rent houses, just like co-working, it's co-living. But because they're doing it through an app, they continuously keep taking feedback from people about their designs. So the co-living app also has a feedback mechanism which goes to great lengths of detail, everything from overall size of cupboard and width of cupboard to location of bed, a room with a window facing a particular road or not facing a road. And as designers, she was saying that they are collecting a lot of data from people in order to understand what are their preferences. So I think that is another sort of important dimension which I think many practitioners might be doing informally or formally in their own practices, which is the completing the feedback loop in order to understand. Because uh, I think, for example, I mean, these kind of examples where you say that you enter a house and sometimes it doesn't feel homely or it feels depressing, and you open the main door and it feels absolutely inviting. Or especially in toilets, I sense that all the time. Sometimes you enter a toilet and it's like dark, dingy, depressing, and you enter some toilets and they are sort of chirpy, bright. Now it is, I mean, the that is because of the architectural elements or their organization is undeniable, because a lot of people have that same feeling. So formula could also be at that bits and pieces level. For sure, it cannot be a formula that will generate the whole design for you. If that happens, of course, we as architects are then not required, right? Then you just require the formula to generate the housing.